Glendale in the white went into the match hopeful of winning their second Bill Turner Cup since the tournament was started just 5 years ago. And while that wasn't the way the game eventuated, second place in a competition involving 250 teams was certainly a commendable performance. It's the second time Glendale have come runners-up. The first was in 1982. Their only better performance was in 81 when they won the cup. From the start last night, the match shaped into a close and hard-fought game, and at half-time, the teams were 0-all. But shortly after the break, Canberra scored the only goal of the match, and then held off many attacks by the Glendale side to make the final score Canberra 1, Glendale 0. Meanwhile, in the Hunter region, Rudy Roth's schoolgirls final, also at Macquarie Field last night, Warners Bay were too strong for Gateshead, scoring 3 goals to 1.
The tests that will be used this year deal specifically with the metal trade and engineering industries. Although Hexham Engineering and the Shortland County Council have used the system for the past 2 years, this is the first time 10 major companies and authorities, including the Hunter District Water Board and BHP, have participated. The tests have been devised by Newcastle University's Department of Behavioural Science. Research Coordinator Dr Peter Pfister says the test is used to devise a shortlist for employers.
The way we use a number of tests in there, which is basically put into 3 different groups, and we allows us to select or measure aptitude on these 3 dimensions, and by using the cut-off points or criteria by the companies, allows us to establish a shortlist.
Now, apprenticeships differ. How does the test make allowance for this?
The tests are different only in some aspects. Some of the tests which uses specifically for trade-related ability, that is the metal trade in this instance.
The strength of the field for this year's Newcastle International Open is highlighted by the fact that both 2 of the top 3 Australian players, as well as 2 of the 100. 2 of the local athletes who organisers expect to do well, 20-year-old Gary Haberl and 14-year-old Shane McGinn, have been doing some last-minute brushing up at the Lake Victoria Sports Centre. The team is regarded as one of Australia's most promising juniors, and has just returned from Japan, where he underwent 6 weeks of intensive training with the world's best coach, Ogamura. Gary Haberl is ranked number 2 in Australia, and is also seeded 2 for the tournament. He's a former Australian champion, and was runner-up in last year's Australian title. He's also the current Newcastle Open title holder. Haberl is using this tournament as a launchpad for his bid to take out next month's Australian title, and rates this weekend's field very highly.
Well, the field this weekend is going to be the hardest one ever in Newcastle. It's probably nearly the hardest in all of Australia put together.
And who are the players that people should watch out for this weekend?
Well, we've got 2 international Koreans coming over here, and one of them's ranked 42 in the world, and the other one's number 10 in Korea. So they will be the ones to watch. We've got Paul Pingwich coming up, who's been 3 times Australian champion. He's in my half of the draw, so I should meet him in the semi-finals.
So how hopeful are you of retaining your title this year?
I'm very hopeful getting to the final to meet one of the Koreans, but to beat one of those, I think I have to hope a very lot.
In suitably elegant surroundings, the audience were treated to a showing of the Spring-Summer collection by Trent Nathan. It's the first time a complete collection by a national designer has been shown in Newcastle, a coup engineered by Darrell's Hair Salon. Berries from the Bruce Burgers concourse provided designer label menswear, which included a new name for the fashion scene in Newcastle, Enrico Caveri. The organisers of the parade are donating proceeds to the Miss Australia Quest and the Spastic Centre of New South Wales. The designs gave fresh meaning to the well-worn fashion phrase, casual elegance. Trent Nathan's collection was based around linen and cotton coordinates in white, pastels and khaki. Here and there were dashes of a floral print with a distinctly 60s feel. Their haircuts for coming summer will again be short, but instead of being combed back as in past seasons, will be swept forward. For men, designers are dictating a flamboyant summer, based around the florals and pages which were so popular in the 60s and 70s. But despite all the prints, the parade hinted that nighttime will again be dominated by classical clothing. Bob Simpson says the Tooheys Challenge Cup match at Harker Oval on October the 16th will be a great
10 years
event.
ago,
The day-night
and
match
the
between
thinking
Newcastle
behind it
and the
was the
Central
fact
Coast will have top international cricketers as guest players in the local team.
it started 10 years ago, and the thinking behind it was the fact that for the last 2 decades the country had supplied 60% of all players that played for New South Wales, and we felt it was about time that perhaps we should then take the star players out into the country to give the country people the opportunity of seeing good players in person.
And what are some of the star players that Newcastle will see this time round?
Well, we look like we're going to have a great lineup. The perennial favourite's got to be here, of course, Dougie Walters. Dirk Wellham, the captain of New South Wales, he'll be playing for Newcastle. The Gosford side will probably contain Greg Matthews, one of the great characters in the game, Steve Rickson and Steve Smith, who at this stage are selected to go to South Africa. And we're looking at someone perhaps like Stephen Waugh, who's a very, very young, hot player, or Imran Khan, depending on whether Imran's available. Hopefully he will be.
The prison warders called a 24-hour strike yesterday after an appeal to segregate a prisoner was rejected by the jail's administration. The warders originally asked that the prisoner in question be placed in segregation and be transferred to another prison. However, the Maitland Jail administration said no, so they held another meeting here at the prison this morning at 8 o'clock. By 8:30, they had sent a compromise to the Commission in Sydney, proposing that the prisoner just be placed under segregation. However, the Commission came back with their reply, no. So they asked, place him in isolation for 24 hours in his own cell. Again, the Commission rejected the proposal. Vice Chairman of the State Prison Officers Association, Arthur Chamberlain, says this isn't good enough.
The administration don't appear to want to discuss matters to try and sort them out. They caused the strike by not removing this prisoner.
However, Maitland Prison Superintendent Alan Penning says the degree of punishment is left to the discretion of the jail management under Section 22 of the Prison Act. Having isolated the prisoner for 24 hours last Saturday, at the time of the alleged offence, he didn't consider the matter warranted further segregation. Arthur Chamberlain doesn't see it that way.
To us and to our members, if it's a physical assault, then he should be segregated. Now, what I would like to know is 2 things. One, if the members return to work and this prisoner is allowed to wander around, what happens if he assaults another officer? Who takes the blame? The other thing the members are asking is, if this prisoner had assaulted the superintendent or deputy or any of the senior executive officers, would this prisoner still be walking out? This was a physical assault.
While the warders are out, the prison's senior officers will do the job of the striking 80 warders. Police from Maitland and Newcastle are assisting. The jail warders here at Maitland Prison are now on strike indefinitely. They plan to ask for support from other prison warders around New South Wales, and they're taking their case to the Arbitration Commission in Sydney.
Peter Sparks commanded great respect amongst the art community for his pastel drawings, and many of his admirers and fellow artists were on hand for the presentation of the award. Professor Laurie Short, the chairman of the organising committee, told the audience that the competition coincides with the first anniversary of an exhibition by Peter Sparks at the Vomberto Gallery and his untimely death. His brother Cameron Sparks said that Peter did not belong to any artistic movement and was a sensitive and private person. The competition attracted 75 entries of very high standard. It was left to competition judge William Bowmore to award the prizes. Third went to Shay Docking for her work Angorphora and Hawkesbury Landscape. Runner-up was Jamie Boyd for Two Figures in Landscape. The winner was something of a surprise. Biodevastation Mount Lofty Summit, South Australia, a work by 80-year-old Joshua Smith. Joshua accepted the $1,000 first prize from the Newcastle Public Trust Office with obvious pleasure, saying it was the greatest surprise of his life.
August Rodin has been judged the greatest sculptor since Michelangelo. His career spanned a period of 50 years. The piece that has now become part of the Bowmore collection is the figure of Pierre de Rissant, one of 6 heroes of Calais, who, to save their city from annihilation by Edward III, volunteered to meet the conditions set by the King of England, to hand themselves over to his hangman after bringing him the keys to the city. The sculpture was created to show human patriotism, self-denial and despair. A man who, by giving his own life, would save a city from starvation. It's the last of only 8 castings. Mr. Bowmore first saw the figure 5 years ago in the Louvre in Paris. He asked the manager whether it would be possible to buy. The answer was no. 7 castings had been made and he was told there would only be 1 more. Perseverance and influence, Mr. Bowmore said, was the only thing that finally resulted in the approval given by the Musée Rodin for the statue to come to Australia. Pierre de Rissant now has pride of place in Mr. Bowmore's sculpture room, bringing his collection of Rodins now to 12. He says there will be no more, at least until the next one. The seminar drew together representatives from
Thank you, Joe. I think so. Certainly, back to some
concerned with the accommodation available for elderly members of Michael's group. Although in the Hunter they make up more than a fifth of the total number of people aged 55 years and over, they are underrepresented in the region's nursing homes and hospitals. Chairman of the seminar and federal member for Newcastle, Alan Morris, says a working party has now been established to examine accommodation and
critical
services.
one is that as people get old, they tend to lose some of their faculties of speech, and with the migrant population, in many cases, they lose their capacity to speak the English they've learnt since they've been here. So they revert back to their native tongue, which then gets very, very difficult for them.
How serious a problem is this in the Hunter?
In the Hunter, it's serious now, and it's getting much more serious into the future. We were, of course, the recipients of quite large numbers of Greeks, Italians, Ukrainians, Polish, Germans, in the late 40s, early 50s, post-war. Those people are now either have just retired or approaching retirement, and for many of them, they're single, they have no families, they're virtually isolated.
When firemen arrived at the doorway of the house and looking to the street Mayfield, it was well and truly alight. It's believed the fire started at the bedroom at the front of the house and was caused by a household heater who was positioned too close to a dressing table. Firemen worked quickly to extinguish the blaze, but by the time the fire was out, the front of the house had been severely damaged. As yet, police have not positively identified the dead man, although it's believed the badly burnt body is that of a 70-year-old invalid who lived in the house. Police will check dental records to identify the man, and it's expected that the identity won't be in 7 days. This year's Abermain Eisteddfod was once again a popular success, with more than 300 entrants competing in different sections. But the Eisteddfod, which has been one of the state's greatest Eisteddfods for nearly 70 years, may fall by the wayside because of tough new laws covering public halls. The Abermain Plaza Hall, which is the home of the Eisteddfod, has lost its licence under the Theatres and Public Halls Act, and now faces a $70,000 bill to regain the licence. Under the Act, the hall must be upgraded to satisfy a 22-point document, and that includes replacement of the exit doors, relining the ceiling, installation of fireproof curtains and renovations to the kitchen. The Cessnock City Council says it will not pay for the changes. If the hall doesn't regain its licence, the Eisteddfod Committee can't charge an admission fee, and they say this will bring to an end a cultural institution which has existed for nearly 7 decades.
There were several other Eisteddfods in the region. All of them have folded, and not even Newcastle has an Eisteddfod like Abermain. They do have their dancing Eisteddfods, but they do not have Eisteddfods that cater for all of the arts like speech, drama, vocal and instrumental, as well as dancing. And really there are very, very few Eisteddfods left in Australia.
Cessnock Mayor Gordon Williams says although the council will not pay for the upgrading of the hall, they don't want the Abermain Eisteddfod to pass by the boards. After the war, the Navy handed over search and rescue operations to the Air Force. Along with the deal came these 20-metre British-designed crash boats. The 113 first came to Newcastle in 1965 and after 20 years' service was auctioned off earlier this year. The Americans mass-produced the boat, but this particular one was made from Australian hardwood by Halverson in Sydney. A 7-man crew would operate the boat in rescue operations with a top speed of about 20 knots. The new owner, a businessman from Fremantle in Western Australia, paid $31,000 for the boat.
In presenting the cheque for $25,000, BHP's General Manager Jack Ridley said it had been a difficult task deciding which of many deserving causes would receive the donations. Mr Ridley said, however, the marching koalas had been chosen as it was the year of youth. He presented the cheque to band manager Peter Cronin, who said 4 of the sousaphones would be going to Tokyo with the band on October 2nd. They will visit Newcastle's sister city of Roubaix and perform in Tokyo. Following the presentation, band gave a demonstration of the work of the BHP.
At a function in Sydney today, the Newcastle Health Fund signed the agreement with the Advance Bank. The General Manager of NIB, Cole Rogers, told the audience that the scheme would be known as Advance NIB Health Fund, replacing the bank's previous MediPlus health insurance coverage. According to Mr Rogers, the agreement offers tremendous potential for the growth of NIB's membership base. The company is already one of the 4 major health funds in New South Wales, with branches throughout the Hunter and Illawarra regions, Canberra, Sydney, the Central Coast and some country centres. The agreement means the public will be able to join NIB at any Advance Bank branch in New South Wales and make claims. Mr Rogers says the Advance Bank's decision is a recognition of the calibre of health insurance offered by NIB. The time display is almost overwhelming in its size. Plenty of outside displays and 2 giant circuits packed with things to see and do. This is the second Trades, Industry and Mining exhibition. Like the first in 1983, it's organised by the Sydney Company's Total Concept exhibition. While the public is welcome, the exhibition has been aimed primarily at industry. To that end, almost every local industrial manufacturer and many more from around Australia are represented, showing everything from spanners to computers.
These exhibitions normally are held in the capital cities, Melbourne, Sydney, and people have got to travel to get there. This is an attempt to get an exhibition of that nature in where it happens, the industrial heart of Australia.
In total, there are 140 exhibitors, many of them representing more than one manufacturer, and visitors should set aside at least half a day to see it all. Time is open all day tomorrow and Saturday.
You just press that one.